My computer freezes irregularly. My computer started to freeze at irregular times for 3 weeks now. Please note that this question changes with each things that I try. For additional details. What happens? My computer freezes, the video stops. No graphic glitches, it just stops. Sound stops too. Sometimes, randomly, the screen on my G15 keyboard flickers and I see characters not at the right places. Usually happens for about 1 to 2 seconds and a bit before my computer freezes. I have to keep the power button pressed for 4 seconds to shut my computer down. I still hear my hard drives and fans working. Sometimes it works with no problems for a full day, some other times it just keeps freezing each time I restart my computer and I have to leave it for the rest of the day. Sometimes my mouse freezes for a fraction of a second, like 0.01 to 0.2 seconds, quite randomly, usually before it freezes. No errors spotted by the Action Center, unlike when I had problems with my last video card on this system, driver errors. My G15 LCD screen also freezes. Sometimes my G15 LCD screen flickers and characters gets carried around temporarily under heavy load. Now, most of the times, the BIOS hard disk's boot order gets reversed for some reason and I have to put it to the right one and save each time I boot. Might be unrelated, not sure, but it first started yesterday. What I did so far. I have had similar problems in the past and I had changed my hard drive, it was faulty, so I tested my software RAID 0 array and it was faulty, so I changed it. I reinstalled Windows 7 with this part. I also tested with unplugging my secondary hard drive. My CPU was running at about 100 degrees Celsius. I removed the dust between the fans and the heat sink and it's now between 45 to 55. I ran a CPU stress test and it didn't froze during the tests, using Prime 95 on all cores. Ran a memory test, using Multist 86 Plus, for a single pass and there were no errors. Ran a POO stress test with UTI tools and Firmark and it didn't froze during the tests. No artifacts either. I had troubles with my graphic card when I got it, but I think that it got fixed with a driver update. I checked the voltages in my BIOS setup and they all seemed okay, plus minus 0.2 I think. I have run on the computer without problems with Fedora 15 on an external hard drive, apart that it couldn't load GNOME 3 and was reverting to GNOME 2, didn't want to install drivers since I use it on multiple computers. I used it to back up my files from the RAID array to my 1TB hard drive for the reinstallation of Windows. So the crashes only happened on Windows, the external hard drive is plugged directly on a SATA port. I contacted Evga, my graphic card vendor, and pointed them on this question. I'm looking for an answer. Ran sensors on Fedora 15 and got this output. This URL. Ran 6 short different CPU stress test on Fedora 15, haven't found any complete stress testers for Linux, and it didn't crash. Changed the thermal paste to some Arctic Silver 5 for my CPU and stress tested the CPU, temperature was at 50 idle, then 64 highest and slowly went down to 62 during the test. Ran some stress testing with a temporary graphic card and it went okay. Ran Firmark stress test with my original graphic card and it froze again. POO had a temp of 74C, a CPU temp of 58C and a MOBO temp of 40C or 45C, to know which one it is from SpeedFan. Ran a firmware stress test and a CPU stress test at the same time. Results: this URL. I have been using my computer without stressing it for about 2 hours now and no crashes yet. I also have disabled the AMD Cool and Quiet function on the BIOS for a more regular power to the CPU. When I ran firmware without CNQ, my computer didn't freeze, but I had a driver kernel error that have recovered, and firmware crashed, all that while running a CPU stress test. The computer eventually froze without me being at it, but this time my screen just went on sleep and I couldn't wake it. Using the stability tester in Tune, my computer froze again, in the same manner as before. I noticed that SpeedFan gives me a 12V of 16.97V and a 5V of 8.78V. I have swapped my G15 with another basic USB keyboard, HP, and I have run firmware for about 10 minutes with the CPU stability test running each 60 seconds for 30 seconds, and my computer haven't crashed yet. Ran some more extended tests without my G15 and it freeze like it usually do. Removed the NForce hard disk controller. Disabled command queuing in the NVIDIA NForce SATA controller for both port 0 and port 1, errors from the logs. Used PUID monitor, here are the voltages, this URL. Changed some configurations in the motherboard BIOS, disabled, PEG-link mode, changed, iTuning, to standard, disabled the 1394 controller, disabled, HD audio, disabled, Micron RAID controller, and disabled, SATA RAID. A little hope, my computer frozen while watching a YouTube video, but not from PU and CPU 10 hours straight test. I have put my BIOS back to defaults and disabled, PEG-link mode, disabled, HD audio, disabled, Micron RAID controller, disabled, serial port address, disabled, parallel port address, and disabled, onboard 1394 controller. I changed the SATA cable for the 750GB hard drive, and I also changed the slots at which they were plugged, 1 and GT, 2, 2 and GT, 3, 3 and GT, 4. Changed the power saving feature of my graphic card from adaptive to maximum performance. Ran ICA aux scanner and got no freeze and no artifacts. I installed the Logitech drivers for my G15 keyboard and my G500 mouse and it restarted to freeze. I removed the Logitech drivers for my G15 keyboard and my G500 mouse and it still freeze. After changing everything except the hard drives, graphic card, and power supply, my computer is running very fine and I haven't run into any problems. This is with the exact same install of Windows that I had problems with my old motherboard. After removing my motherboard, I have found some cambered capacitors, too, which might be the source of the problems. Since it almost clearly was a motherboard problem caused by these capacitors, I am going to accept the answer that is the most related to this solution. When it happens. When I play video games, mostly. When I play flash games, second most. When I'm looking at my desktop background, it rarely happens when I have a window open, but it does, sometimes. When my graphic card and my CPU are stressed. Sometimes when my graphic card is stressed. Sometimes when my CPU is stressed. Specs. Windows 7 x64 Home Premium. Motherboard, M2 NSLE Deluxe. Graphic card, EVGA GTX 570, the Nonok 1, NVIDIA driver version 275.33 from EVGA's website. CPU, AMD Phenom 9950X2 at 2.6 GHz. Memory, Kingston 4x2 GB dual channel, pretty basic memory sticks. Hard drives, was 2x250 GB, Western Digital Caviar, in RAID 0 plus 1 TB, WD Caviar Black. I replaced the RAID array with a 750 GB, WD Caviar Black. Yes, I removed the array from the RAID configurations. 750W power supply. No overclocking. Ever. There have been some power downs like 4 to 5 weeks ago, but the problem didn't start immediately after. I wasn't home, so my computer got shut down. Event logs, warnings, errors and critical errors, for the last 24 hours, this URL. I would like to thank everyone who have been participating. It's really nice to see that much people ready to help others. There was many great answers that might help other people with similar problems in the future, at least I hope so. In this situation, how can I successfully pinpoint the current hardware problem? If it's a hardware problem,
"100°C is way too hot. It's possible that your processor has already incurred some damage. But in the interest of being optimistic, I'd say to run Memtest 86 for another 2 passes to be sure it's not the memory. Are you sure the timings and speeds are being detected correctly? Did you check your motherboard for bad/puffy capacitors? If it's not your motherboard, then your SU is either going bad on you, or is insufficient to power your hardware. That sounds like the most likely cause to me. Use Core Temp to measure CPU temps, since it's one of the most accurate programs around. Don't use AudiTool, as it's incompatible with Windows 7. Try Rivatuner instead.
First off, +1 for a perfectly documented question. This makes things amazingly easier for us to help. You've done a lot of hardware testing to date and most come up with no problems. However, this may still be a CPU overheating problem. Been there and it sucks. When you cleaned the dust, did you see any thermal paste between the CPU and the heatsink? If so, was it dried up or old? I recommend buying a small tube of Arctic Silver thermal paste, $7, and applying some to the CPU. If that's not the issue, then I strongly suggest you start looking at your operating system and if it has any issues. You said you've run Fedora on it. I would recommend burning a Linux Livac and booting from it. Try using that as your OS for a bit, browsing and playing music/videos and stuff. If you don't get a crash there, that means that it's either a Windows issue or a HDD issue, seeing as you aren't using it in a live environment. I would, from the Livac, run a disk check just to make sure. If everything comes up clean, we can safely say it's Windows. In that case, you need to determine if it's your OS which is corrupted or you've installed something that is running some kind of service which locks your computer up. Give Windows Safe Mode a try and use that for a bit. I know, horrible resolution, I'm so sorry. If you don't get a freeze for a couple days, then we can narrow it down to a Windows OS issue, in which case you need to look at backups or reinstallation. If you're reinstalling your OS, make sure you back all your stuff up. This URL. Edit. While running in your Livac session, open up a terminal and type sensors. If that program is installed, Linux only, it will give you details about your power supply voltages, CPU temp, Mobo temp, and everything else you need to know. Monitoring that while in your Livac session should give you strong indicators to whether this is hardware or software. Edit to, Based on what you've said about running Fedora on another HDD via eSATA and not experiencing any crashes, I would have to say that this is a software issue, maybe drivers. If you can run Fedora for, let's say, a whole week without a crash, it's for sure an issue with Windows or deprecated/wrong drivers. How long did you run Fedora for? Did you try watching movies, playing games, etc. on it?
The first thought I have is that your power supply may be going bad. Playing games or watching YouTube may kick your GRFX card into high gear and increase power draw. Also watch those CPU temps 100 degrees, yikes.
I'll stop on this. I have to keep the power button pressed for 4 seconds to shut my computer down. And I can tell it's a power supply issue. To avoid having to leave it for rest to get up again, turn it off, unplug the screen and the power cord and hold the power button for till to 15 seconds. This will discharge any component holding some electric charge. See if you can get a replacement, and you may also check for faulty capacitors, as here why won't my computer boot? And replace them.